Well, everyone, I'm excited today because my guest today, I know, has followed our podcast since almost the very beginning, I think. And I'm just excited to have Sarah Jo Eversole on. She is Everbloom Fields in Lancaster, Texas. And
hmm
I know she has grown in some extreme conditions and has figured it out. And welcome, Sarah Jo, to the Flower Podcast.
Yay! I'm so excited. I'm fangirling right now, actually. So I might embarrass myself, but I'm very
Well, it's all good. I know that I have appreciated your feedback and your encouragement over the years. And I was so excited to meet you a couple years ago at the ASCFG conference in person. And I knew that we just had to get you on the podcast, and I was glad that it worked out for today. So yay. So, we always start at the
yay.
beginning. And how did you find your way into the world of growing flowers?
Man, that's a great question. I always loved nature. I spent half my childhood in a tree. And flowers. I love growing things. So I purchased our home with this sort of big lot in the back. We had an intention to grow a really big vegetable garden, which is great. But it turns out I don't really love vegetables all that much. But my daughter was born with some health problems, and I was a data analyst, and I was forced to quit my job to stay at home with her and give her full-time care. And so I looked at this huge backyard and I needed to make money from home somehow because we had a little bit of an income gap since I quit my job. Since I'd always loved growing things and I loved flowers, I picked up several books about growing flowers. I just so happened to have Lynn Basinski's flower grower book
Yeah.
randomly. I also love books, so I have a ton of books and read it and just decided a little randomly, I think, to start a flower farm in this lot that I had behind my home. And so I did. It was really quite, I think, quite a bold step. I randomly decided to do it, and I dove in head first and just got it running. Joined the ASCFG, took some online courses. Within a year, we were selling, making money, and we've been going ever since. So a little bit random, but it has turned out to be an excellent fit for me. So very excited.
That's awesome. Well, I know just from reading that you grow, like you said, on this lot in the back of your house. So how much land are you actually growing on?
So production space is a little over 1/8 of an acre in production. And it doesn't sound like very much, but once you start growing on that much, you realize it's a decent amount to farm flowers. So thousands and thousands and thousands of stems. Um, it's a lot for one person to cultivate, but it also brings in that extra income that we need and outside in nature. It's just great. Yeah. So small or bean grow, it's still very doable as a business. And yeah, so it's enough land. In the beginning, I wished that I had more, but as I've sort of dialed in my production, I realized that this is a good size for me at this time. Um, and yeah, so just over 1/8 of an acre.
That's incredible. Well, I know that growing in such a confined space, you've had to prioritize certain things, and I'm sure from what I've read, like your business model has changed a little bit. So, what was that process like? Like, where were you and where are you now, as far as like maybe who you sell to and what you're growing?
Yes, so being small definitely affects my decision making in so many ways. When I first started out, I started out at a farmer's market selling and then selling CSA. And I really think that's an amazing first way for beginner flower farmers to get visibility, to get practice, because a farmer's market is very forgiving in many ways. You don't
Yes.
necessarily have to have the same quality that you do if you're selling to a florist, because industry standard is pretty technical. So it gives you space to bring just whatever you have blooming and sell it, and it gives you a quick income while you're figuring out which plants grow best, which plants give you the most volume, which plants people like. So I started out that way, and I just think it's such a smart way for a beginner flower farmer to start out. I created so many connections through that farmers market audience that have served me now as I've sort of pivoted to more florist sales and event sales. So many of those connections came through the farmers market. So from a marketing standpoint, from just a sales standpoint, it was a great way to start out, and I loved it. And I consider myself pretty lucky to have landed at a really good farmers market just so early on in the life of the business. So
Well, I totally agree because, when you're making bouquets, whether they're straight bunches of sunflowers or snaps or mixed things, you can use sort of a grade B flower. Not that you intentionally did that, but as you're learning and your flower quality is getting better, you can do all those things and people still love what you're producing. And it's fresh and it lasts long.
yes, absolutely. While you're learning what is a grade B and a grade A, and while you're learning all of the things that go into growing a flower farm, these lovely people are just so excited to have fresh flowers that are locally grown from a farm, and they're all supportive and encouraging. It's just it's a great way to start out when you're learning.
Sure. And so you made this transition to selling to florists. So now do you mostly sell to florists?
Yes, I sell almost entirely to florists. I do a few events on the side, and I'll do a few pop-ups just to maintain those community connections that I have. It's really important for me to make sure that just because I'm selling to florists, I don't lose the visibility that I sort of built up
Mm,
in Dallas with all these other organizations, people. The visibility of a local flower farmer, I think, is really huge as far as moving the local flower movement forward. So I don't want to lose that visibility. So even though I'm selling to florists, I still try to do some pop-ups here and there, some events here and there. But yes, almost exclusively to florists. And it's worked so much better with my life because I don't go to the farmer's market on a Saturday. I have kids, there's soccer games. I don't have the extra labor of making a bouquet. So I'm selling straight bunches. So I've cut out all this extra labor. And strangely enough, as I have how to produce a very high quality cut flower, I can get more for that high quality selling to a florist than I can selling to a farmer's market. So they're not necessarily going to pay a whole lot of extra money for like a longer stem or a high cost production flower like ranunculus or lisianthus. The farmer's market audience isn't really going to pay top dollar for that, but a
mm.
florist will. And so I'm actually earning more selling to a florist than I would selling to a farmer's market.
Yeah, they really find the value in what you're doing,
Yes,
which I think is great. Sometimes that transition is scary for people. It's one thing when you're in a farmer's market and people are everywhere and they find you and they come to you and then you become a regular stop for them. But when you've got to go cold calling or you have to go knocking on doors, a florist, that's really sometimes scary and overwhelming. And I know you said you made some connections through the market, but is that where you started? Like people you met through there that were florists, or how did you make that transition? Because I know that sometimes people don't know how to do that. How do you reach out to a florist?
Yeah, so there's a few florists that I met through my farmers market audience. There's also social media, which has been huge because I've never had to cold call a florist.
Mm.
Almost all of them found me through my social media and through Instagram. And so learning how to take high quality pictures, learning how to use hashtags. And then I went and found local florists and started following them, started supporting them, liking their posts, commenting, helping their algorithm. And then they sort of get to know me. They look and see my product. So it was finding those with the florist. It was sort of a multi-pronged approach, I guess, if you will. And then I actually, when I first started making bouquets for the farmers market, I didn't know what I was doing. So I several design courses that were offered by a few local florists.
Oh.
So then I got to know them. And some of them have since bought from me. So to me, it's more like, it's not so much going out and being like, hey, buy my product. It's like, hey, we're in this floral industry together. Let me support you, cheer you on. This is what I'm doing. If it's a good fit, great. If it's not a good fit, then let's not. Let's just do what works for everyone. And so it was more fostering relationships and community. And I think that led to a lot of my now current sales. The other thing is I teamed up with another flower farmer, and her aunt has a florist shop.
Mm.
And so she sells some of my product as well. So we have this business relationship where we combine our flowers so that we have more volume, we have more diversity in our offerings to the florist. And then she has some floral connections that I benefit from, and I have some floral connections that she benefits from. So again, this collaborative really helps boost the sales for everyone.
Yeah. Well, I like that. And that's just sort of using your network of people. And which is a natural thing to do. I mean, somebody, you've met somebody, what better thing to talk about than flowers? And it's a great foundation, I think, to grow on. And I want to go back and just highlight something you said earlier that I think is also important. How you do your pop-ups and you maintain those community connections from the days when you were doing the farmers market. And I think that's really important too, because it gives you brand recognition. It gives you sort of gives you added value. So when the florists see that you're connected with people, that helps them also promote their flowers, because they're coming from Sarah Jo and they're her great flowers. And it's like you're continuing to add value to what you do. And I think that's really awesome.
Yes, and sometimes I even get these wedding inquiries that they want installations and things that I'm not really equipped to do. And I will send them to florists in the area that I know that are maybe close to the location of that bride, or that, do really great installations. So I'm also giving them business, and they're in turn buying my flowers to use for that wedding. So it just works all the way around to really realize that they're trying to make a living wage as well as I am. And if we can all help each other, it's great. I also want to mention that, I think education is so important. I went to the Team Flower Conference in Austin several years ago, and that was amazing. And I met so many Dallas florists at that conference. And some of my connections came just from that, attending that. And so I think it's also important when you're getting out there and you want to sell to florists to be a part of the floral world. So go to these floral conferences, and, they love flowers like you do. It's just a great point of shared passion. And you can use that to just have a great time and meet people and eventually gain customers.
What a great idea. Yeah, because, so many times people don't do that crossover where they go to that floral event like that and make those connections. I mean, I know that there's also just people that I've met. I think there is a pretty robust floral association there in the state of Texas, which there may be those kinds of groups in your state, wherever you live, and that might be another good point of entry because they're all in that same area. And I know not everything, don't expect everybody to fit with everybody, but it's definitely a way to make connections.
Yes, and I feel like if you're going to sell to an industry, you should really understand that industry. And so, if I want to make have a great product and make a great sale, it's on me to understand the industry that I'm trying to sell to. So, to go be a part of the floral industry and understand what they need from me changes what I grow and when I grow, and it just makes me fit better with their needs, and it works all the way around.
I love that because so many times we expect them to sort of fit our pattern and it's a give and take. So I'm wondering
Yes.
what like could you give us an example or two of something that you've learned over your 7 years that florists are looking for in what you grow?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things I've learned is the specific flowers that they want. So I don't necessarily see what they're getting from wholesaler. So it's really understanding. They've given me feedback like I don't want this type of a mum. I can't really use it. Or I get really good from the wholesaler. What I really need is more snapdragons and less stock. Or the butterfly ranunculus we're getting just are not up to par. So I'll stop growing the things that they don't really have a need for if they feel like they can get high quality stock. This past year I took it out. I'm not growing any stock. Instead, I've doubled my snapdragons because they've told me this is what we need. We need bigger, fluffier snapdragons. I stopped growing regular ranunculus. I went all in on the butterfly ranunculus because I can grow like 3 foot stem butterfly ranunculus, and they just it blows their mind.
Yay.
They love that I can cut eucalyptus from my tunnel in January. So it's just, you dialogue with them and you say, what do you need? Like, it's not just about me growing what grows best for me and then trying to convince them to buy it. They have to make a living too. So, yeah, it's just really important to try and line up. If you're going to grow for florists, line up what you're growing with their needs because then everybody benefits. And so I have a continual dialogue with my florists about what they need and what's working and what's not. And if something's not working, I don't take it personal. I just cut it from production and grow something else. So, yeah.
Is that hard though when it might be a crop, for example, that is super easy to grow and you're like, oh no, I really want to keep growing this?
No, it's not hard at all because if they don't need it, they're not going to buy it. So I don't care how easy it is. I need to make a living. So no, it's not hard at all. If I know something's going to sell, I'll grow the thing that sells and stop growing the thing that doesn't. Oh, yeah.
I love that. No, that's actually really great. Now, going back to the butterfly ranunculus, I know that 2 years ago, we got a little taste of some local butterfly here in Nashville. And last year, we had sort of a tsunami of it. And I was really nervous because I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much butterfly ranunculus. But you know what? I think we sold out every time. I mean, it didn't matter how much they brought. It's like we couldn't keep up. And it's such an incredible difference having local versus traditional. And I'm kind of curious about your thought process because traditional ranunculus, I feel like often there's so many people growing it, and it ships okay, and you can bring it from California, you can bring it from wherever if the florist is determined to do that. But the butterfly ranunculus are another story. Do you get more per stem with the butterfly? Do you get more stems per plant with the butterfly? Like, I'm kind of curious what your thought process was there.
It's both. I get more production volume from the same space with a butterfly ranunculus, and I get more per stem. So price per stem is double for a butterfly. And I was really hesitant to invest in butterfly because the upfront cost of the coin is a bit more expensive. But I was getting all this feedback from florists saying, we really want this. And so that gave me the confidence to just go all in. And sure enough, they bought me out. Very high price per stem. So I made probably maybe 40% profit margin on my butterfly ranunculus, maybe a little bit more. So that's really good in the flower farming world. And I am one of the few growers that has a tunnel. And there's, again, not very many flower farmers in Dallas for the amount of wedding business and floral business. Just the discrepancy is massive. So I think I could probably farm a whole acre of butterfly and still sell out because the market is there. So,
How long is your season on butterfly?
well, it depends. No two seasons in Dallas, Texas are the same. Like literally. I could start some years, like they'll start in January. Some years they won't start till March. I really prefer them not to start until March because the wedding industry, the wedding season doesn't start until March. So if I have them blooming in January, there's a lot less sales outlet. But I can go, I would say 6 to 8 weeks, and they'll keep cranking. So March through April is my normal season. And some of it's because I have a shade cloth in my tunnel, so it keeps the soil cool when the heat waves come. But yeah, so 2 months, I'd say.
Yeah. And are there certain colors of butterfly ranunculus that do better for you sales wise, or do you kind of grow all of them?
Well, I don't grow all of them because I have a small space.
Sure.
So if I grew all of them, I would end up with like 3 bunches of each color. That's not enough for a florist. So last year I grew all of one color.
Okay.
Well, no, actually I grew a little bit of yellow, but the Adrian, the blush pink, 99% of all my ranunculus were that color. And it's very popular. And that way I can offer a florist who has a wedding 12 bunches. Whereas, and this is part of micro flower farm growing strategy, you can't grow all the colors because you can't produce volume. So you really have to dial in on the 1 or 2 colors that are most requested so that you have enough volume for the sale to be worth it to your florist.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I know a favorite of ours has been, I think it's called Eris, Eris, which is kind of a peachy color. Mm-hmm. And I think the one you mentioned, and I think those are the two. If you were only going to pick 2, I think those are the 2 I would pick. Even though there's a lot of fabulous colors out there, but I still think those are the 2 colors that kind of work on everything. So I'm glad to hear that you're doing that. As far as I wanted to go to, I was recently reading your latest blog post about anemones, and I thought, okay, so now you're making the choice to not grow those. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that because, again, you kind of touched on that a little bit, and I want to expand on it if we could.
Yes. So now that I sold a florist, the biggest season for sales to them is wedding season. And in Texas, that starts in March. But anemones, because we have such a mild winter climate, anemones bloom in January and February. So the wedding season hasn't started yet. And there's not really a robust sales outlet for that. So I have a micro farm and I'm dedicating space to a flower that's not blooming at the right time, the time when I have my most robust sales, when I can mark up my stems the highest price point. So I just had to cut them out because, again, as a micro grower, I need every stem to bring me as much money as it possibly can.
Sure.
So you have to line up the timing of your crop with the timing of your most robust sales. So I cut out pretty much everything that didn't bloom from March when the wedding season starts to May. That's the big chunk of sales. So I really give space, almost all my space, to crops that bloom in that window.
Okay. And then what, obviously you mentioned butterfly ranunculus, you've mentioned snaps. What other crops are sort of your big crops for that window?
Delphinium is a huge one. We can grow high quality delphinium. The florists love it. It's a blue, so it's in high demand for wedding season. We also grow campanula. The florists
Mm.
love our campanula. They go nuts over it. And then we grow dianthus, which is just a workhorse, tons and tons of blooms. It's interesting because you wouldn't automatically think of them as a floral wedding flower, but they create a lot of bulk for like centerpieces in the middle of a centerpiece. They help fill it out. So our florists love it.
Well, let
And
me
then
ask
we
you, let me
do,
jump in real quick. So
yeah.
dianthus is a big family. Which ones are you growing? Because
Oh,
I'm
so
impressed.
we're growing. Yes, thank you for that. We're growing Amazon dianthus. So no carnations. The carnations we grow just can't compete with the carnations they can
Right.
get from the wholesaler. So again, we're not trying to compete with the wholesaler. That I feel like that's a little bit of a losing battle. We're trying to fill in the gaps the
Right.
florists have with the wholesaler. And so our Amazon dianthus can get super tall, and our florists like it. And then we also do. Let me see. There's one more. I feel like I'm forgetting. We do some peonies. We can get peonies to the market way before the wholesaler offers them. So they love that. And yeah, that's about it. So we don't grow very many, like 8 crops. But again, we have to provide volume. And so we just grow hundreds and hundreds of these sort of staple crops. And every week we can offer the florist, you know, a considerable number of bunches with these particular flowers that they feel they can't get quality from the wholesaler. So
So then how do you transition in the summer? Because it gets so blazing hot there. Do you take a break? Do you just kind of clean up and reset for the fall? How do you handle that?
yeah, so the last 2 years we have not grown in the summer for production. And it's because we were making all of our money on spring flowers. So then we don't want to give any space to summer flowers when the spring ones are still blooming. But I think I'm actually going to change that this next year and try to go back into summer production. I'm not quite sure how that will work. It is a lot of number crunching. I have a bazillion spreadsheets. It works out really well that I used to be a data analyst because just it's like solving a puzzle with data, and I love it to death. But what we've done the past 2 years is we've just taken a break for summer, and we've grown dahlias and mums over the summer. So then we pull the crops out at the end of April, mid-May, and we plant in dahlias and mums. We keep them alive all summer, which is, a task. And then we
Sure.
have an autumn sale season because in Texas, weddings also drop off in the summer, but then we have a robust autumn wedding season. And so we try to have those flowers ready for the wedding season in autumn.
So then your fall wedding palette is mums, eucalyptus, probably some,
Yes.
the dahlias.
Mm-hmm.
I see Lysianthus behind you there in the high tunnel. How does that play into your rotation?
Well, no, that's a summer. It's sort of our one-off summer crop. And the florists, they don't tend to have too many summer weddings, but they'll go ahead and use it in their florist shop. We have a few shops, so they'll buy them for their sort of one-off orders. But the Lysianthus I'm growing behind me is an experiment. So I bought pre-chilled, I love to experiment. I bought pre-chilled Lysianthus plugs and planted them in August, which is so super hot. And I'm trying to get them to bloom now or a few weeks from now because we're sort of at the height of our autumn wedding season. And they're budded up. I'm giving them some extra warmth, some extra light, some, extra compost tea. And I'm really hoping to coax them into blooming. And if that experiment works and I can do Lysianthus production specifically targeted for that autumn wedding season, again, I'm taking the flower and getting it to bloom at a time that suits the needs of my sales outlet. If I can line those two things up, we'll be off to the races. But it's still an experiment at this point. So.
So, is there particular Lysianthus varieties that you grow for the summer when you're doing your normal production?
No, I've tried a whole bunch of different varieties. They all perform pretty much the same. So the main thing is that I try to grow pinks and whites. I don't grow all the colors, a very neutral palette. Um, I, I'm trying to think. I don't grow arena. They actually get way too tall and topple over.
Which one?
Arena,
Oh, okay. Hmm.
yeah, it just gets way, it's so tall, like crazy tall. Lysianthus is native to Texas, and Arena just goes nuts, like 5 feet tall, and I can't keep it from falling over. So I'm
That's
trying to
insane.
think. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I really should, but I can't. There's so many varieties that I have tried. It's in a spreadsheet, but off the top of my head, I can't quite remember the variety
No, it's all
I
good.
grow. Maybe Voyage, I think is one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you are really dialed in and focused on what you do, which is so impressive. I know many times it feels like we grow things because we're passionate about a specific flower, because it's easy, because we have a handful of people who may like it. But then when you are crunching numbers to really look at, okay, where's my profit? Where's my, where isn't my profit? You are making hard decisions
Yeah.
that really aren't hard because you're trying to make as much per square foot as you can. I think that is really incredible. And I'm wondering, is that a natural thing for you? Like you just love because of the data analysis background that you crunch the numbers and the numbers don't lie, or is it that you have picked up some education along the way that has really opened your eyes to that? I mean, I'm kind of because a lot of people struggle with this, and how do you figure out what is my real profit? I think when you are smaller, it's easier because you probably don't have as many inputs and you have a more tight turnaround time.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, how did you get to that line of thinking, and how do you approach that more specifically? Because there's a lot of people out there that are sort of winging it.
Yeah, I think the fact that I started out needing to make supplemental income from the get-go really made me aware that this was a business that I was starting. And then one of the very first things I did was go to the ASCFG conference in Denver, 2018. That was totally focused on the business of flower farming.
Hmm.
And so many of those sessions talked about these things. I remember flower farmers putting up their financials on the screen, broken down into spreadsheets showing this is profit margin, this is, overhead expense, this is gross revenue versus, just normal revenue. And so it was all in the beginning, all of that awareness was there. And it was partly due to the ASCFG. And so then it made me really seek out more education in that way and take more courses geared towards the business part of flower farming. And I know Jeannie Larkin just put a book out about
Right.
flower farming, and that I have that book. It's an amazing book. It's a great resource if anyone is wondering about the business side of flower farming. But it was born out of necessity. I needed to make an income. And so, yeah, the information is out there and it's not too hard to find. Just, I think earlier this year, even the ASCFG did a special seminar with a flower farmer in North Carolina, Carolina Flowers, and she talked about pivot tables and tracking your harvest and your stems and figuring out where your volume is coming from. Incredibly helpful stuff. So yeah, I think there's a natural inclination because of the data, but also just necessity sort of pushed me towards dialing in my production as a business.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that is such a um, encouragement, and I don't know. I feel inspired by that because I feel like, a lot of times people feel like you can't make money on such a small piece of land, and I feel like there is possibilities there, but there's just some things you're not going to grow, and some things you are going to grow, and it also depends on who your market is, who is your customer base. Yeah.
Yeah, you absolutely can make money, but you have to be intentional about your choices and make sure that they're business choices. So I think that's where a lot of flower farmers maybe get sort of off the rails. They don't step back and say, is this a good business choice? And sort of look at it from that way, that perspective. There's a book out, I think it's called The Farmer's Office, that just talks about how it's important that you spend as much time in the office as you do in the field if you're running a flower farming business, because you have to know your numbers. You have to make these decisions based on real factors and not just imagined factors. Like, oh, I think I grew a lot of this. Well, if you're not counting your stems, you don't really know. So yeah, it's totally possible. You just have to do it with intention.
Right. And I think that's true. If you don't know your stem count, you don't know really, like, should I be growing more of this or less of this or none of this, because you don't know what your revenue is then. I think it's amazing for me to hear some of the things like you chose to not grow stock anymore because, you're trying to find, and this is what I tell the growers I work with too, you're trying to find those niche sort of gaps in what the wholesalers do or what other local growers do. I know in preparing for this and reading, that you're part of a network of other growers in North Texas. And yeah. I'd love to hear more about that because I think that is so important to be collaborative with other farmers. And I'm wondering how that works and how everyone kind of plays well together and sort of how you guys play off each other.
Yeah, so I have to give credit to Amanda Van Hoosier. She is one of the very first flower farmers here. She started the same time I did. And she has been involved in the local flower farming movement, not just flowers, but food for decades. She helped start one of the local farmers markets. So when she decided to grow flowers, she really set up this Zoom meeting and invited all of us. And I was one of the first to grow flowers along with her. So we sort of connected on that point. And then ever since then, anyone who wants to start growing flowers, we sort of invite them in because we can learn from each other, first of all. Second of all, it's really kind of hard to grow flowers in Texas. You want someone that understands your pain. You want to commiserate with someone else who understands the craziness of growing flowers in Texas. The other thing is, because I have 1/8 of an acre, and as you said, I want to find this niche market. If someone else is growing and they have like 5 acres, we'll talk and they'll grow all the things that I'm not growing. And so together we're meeting the needs. Like maybe some of the florists really love Rudbeckia. Well, I don't get a super high price point for it. I can't get a ton of volume in my space. And so some other flower farmer that has maybe 5 acres will grow all the Rudbeckia and sell all of that to the florists. So it's just finding what works for all of us. All of us play a part in meeting the market demands. Our market is massive. There's a massive wedding market in Dallas. I like to joke that almost all the contestants on The Bachelorette come from Dallas, Texas. They're all very big floral wedding minded. So when we work together, we meet the market's demand. And that means that the market keeps asking for local flowers, which is really important. We don't want them to ever stop asking because they're not getting what they're asking for.
Mm.
So we meet every month on Zoom, and then in person, we meet up maybe once or twice a year at each other's farms to just see what we're doing. And together we try and go out and expand the visibility of local flower farms and then meet the demand. And it's great. I love it. I think it's just an amazing way to push our agricultural industry forward, I guess.
Sure. Now, do the majority of those farmers sell to florists, or do they all have different business models?
We all have different business models. Some are at farmers markets. Some came into like a farmers market that I left. If they're beginners, most of them are at farmers market, which again, I think is just an excellent choice when you're first learning.
Mm-hmm.
And then the ones that are more intermediate are starting to do more events. And then a few of us that have been growing for a longer amount of time are now really meeting the florist market sales channel. So again, we're sort of all fitting into the sales channel that matches up with our growing in space, whether it's big or small. It matches up with sort of our experience level. And again, when we get together and talk about all these things, we can help each other figure out which lane is the best lane. And so then we're all, it just works. I don't really have good words to describe it, but it just really works. So,
well, I think that's great. I mean, I feel like sometimes people are nervous about being a part of something like that because, you know, they're your competitors. We're all selling to the same people, and there's that mindset that I feel like kind of gets in the way. But I don't feel like it has to be that way.
No, it's definitely not, because, like I said, Dallas is massive. So almost none of us are selling to the same people. There's like 20 some farmers markets just in the metro area. So like there's not even 20 flower farmers. So even if you had a flower farmer at each market, you still wouldn't be in each other's way. So there's plenty of space for all of us. And so we're just, like I said, we're trying to help each other, because if a flower farmer succeeds at a market 30 minutes from me, she's keeping local flowers visible to the public. And in a way, she's marketing for our whole industry, and it's helping me because, you know, the more exposure the general public has to locally grown flowers, the better.
Right. Now that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Now, I'm curious if there are crops that you're growing that, you know, because you love to experiment, and you know, there's a lot of traditional crops, but are there any not so traditional crops you're growing that are getting good dollar amounts for you as far as sales?
The only one that I can think of off the top of my head are my forget-me-not. I wouldn't say that they're sort of a traditional flower farmer crop, but I can get 4-foot tall stems in my high tunnel, and they're a blue. I know it's crazy.
How is that even possible?
I don't even know, but I think I sent a picture. I think I sent you a picture, maybe not, but I can show you a picture. 4-foot stems, and they're a blue, like a light, airy blue in the middle of wedding season. And so my florists love them, and I don't think that you would think of them as the traditional crop for a flower farmer, but they love them. They pay a lot more money than I would expect for a blue forget-me-not that's, you know, 3 to 4 feet in length. So yeah, that's the only one I can think of. Everything else is pretty much a standard cut flower.
Golly, 4-foot forget-me-nots. That's just, I'm like, what are you putting on those things? I mean, seriously.
I think it's the shade, that they like the shade in the high tunnel. So
they stretch.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
And I plant them super tight too, like 4 inches, something crazy tight spacing. So
yeah, that's interesting you bring that up, because I think about with the size of your property, are there other crops you put super tight spacing on? You know, because a lot of times we I always like to tell people that plants can't read, so they don't know how far they're supposed to be apart from each other. But when you're trying to get more production per square foot and long stems, I'm just kind of curious, is there anything else like that that you put super tight together?
Yeah, I would say I put everything super tight. So my butterflies are like 8 to 9 inches. Um, snapdragons are like two plants to a hole. I don't know how much tighter you can get than that. Um, Even my eucalyptus, they're like trees, but they're still only like 12 inches apart. My dahlias, I'll plant like 6 inches apart. Yeah, everything is super tight spacing. Some of that I learned from Folk Hill Farm, Julie, you had her on not
Yeah.
too long ago. She does her crops at a super tight spacing. And because she grows in Florida, we often commiserate about how difficult it is to grow in a warm climate. And she does hers at super tight spacing. And so I was like, well, shoot, I'm gonna try it. So yeah, everything is a super tight spacing. Delphinium, yeah, 4 to 6 inches. So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Straight up. Stems go straight up. So
So has there been anything that you've tried that didn't work very well planting it that close?
no, I think I'm sorry, that sounds really arrogant. No. So Dallas, Texas is a dry climate. So we don't have the humidity that other climates might deal with. So
Hmm.
then I don't have to worry so much about the botrytis or some of those fungal diseases that can spread really easily without airflow because we're not humid. We're a really dry climate. So I can get away with tighter spacing in areas that otherwise might be disease prone. But
Well, that's a great point. And everyone has their different microclimate, and you have to consider all those things. But if you don't have the humidity, yeah, that tends to lend itself to being a little more forgiving, I think, for sure.
yes, yes, I think it does for sure.
So,
I lucked out with the humidity. I don't luck out with the temperatures.
yeah,
But
yeah, well, yeah, you're right. Absolutely right. And I'm kind of also curious. So, what is your soil like there? I mean, if it's so hot and everything.
yeah, so I have clay soil and it's great in that it has a ton of nutrients. So I use compost tea and that's about it. I don't add additional fertilizers. Occasionally maybe like some bone meal to my peonies, but other than that, it has this natural fertility that's just wonderful. But because it's clay, if we get a very big rain event, then it's like mud. It's just like a soggy, hot mess of mud. So all of my rows are mounded at least 3 inches because drainage is so important with clay soil. If we happen to have rain, it tends to be all at once. And so I
Mm.
have to make sure that none of my plants are sitting in wetness. And then in the summer, it's so hot, it bakes the clay into this massive hard pan. There's cracks that are so big I can stick my hand down them.
That's
I
crazy.
joke that I could make bricks and build a house from my soil. So it's really important for me to farm in a way that lessens compaction. So we don't till, we broad fork because we don't want to compact our soil at all. It naturally compacts. Even though I don't grow production level in the summer, I try to be growing something in the soil to have the roots to keep it aerated, to keep it shaded, to keep it from
So,
erosion or just baking into a hard pan.
so like cover
So
crops or
yes, cover crops or even just, zinnia seeds are inexpensive. So I'll grow a ton of zinnias in the summer. I just won't necessarily sell them. A lot of times I'll give them away. And it's partly because zinnias don't do great with our florists. You can't keep them in the cooler. They don't have a whole lot of weddings that they're doing flowers for in the summer. But it's fun to be able to give it away, like zinnias and stuff. I do it for the soil's sake. I grow buckwheat is a good cover crop. in the tunnel, I have mums are actually really great. I'm growing them for an autumn harvest, but their roots do really great at aerating my clay soil. And the soil tends to be pretty fluffy once I pull the mums out. So I really love growing them just from that aspect.
Mm.
But yeah, I'm intentional about keeping the soil covered in the summer so that it doesn't compact.
Now, you said you try to create these beds that are at least 3 inches high. Do
Mm-hmm.
you, with clay, I know this can be hard. So, are you bringing in organic matter? Does your cover crop give you enough organic matter, or is it more just soil preservation?
It's both. So I do bring in compost. It's probably one of my largest expenses. Operating expenses is the compost that I bring in. And then the cover crop gives me a little extra. The good thing is, if we don't have a really big rain event, the the mounds will stay pretty high through a year or two, but then inevitably we have this massive flooding event. It washes quite a bit away, and then I have to bring in another load of compost. But we're in our seventh year now, and it's to the point where at least the first 2 to 3 inches of my soil is now fluffy. It's wonderful. I
That's great.
I think it's really just been transformed from the continual growth of plants and nutrients and cover crops and compost. The whole cycle of farming and the way that we do it, I think has actually helped our soil instead of deplete it, which was my goal all along. So I feel like now I have this amazing benefit of clay rich in nutrients on the lower level and fluffy soil on the top level, which is to me the most ideal thing. So I really don't want to move.
I bet.
I don't want to move. My soil is great now, so I love it. Yeah.
That's funny. Well, I have to say that it just amazes me and what you're able to do and the profit you're making. You know, we haven't talked about big numbers, but that's okay. My point is you're making an income off of what you're doing. And I feel like a lot of times, like I've already said once, I believe that so many times we feel like we have to have 5 acres or, 3 acres or 10 acres or whatever we think and some of that may depend on what it is you want to grow. Yeah. If you want to grow woodies, yeah, you may need that kind of acreage. But if you're just trying to start where you are, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
what a better, I can't think of a better story, or your experience that you've shared that you're able to do that. Um, I know that you've figured some of this out along the way. And I know you also mentioned to me before we started recording, like you took advantage of some SBA courses and some other courses that kind of helped you. And I want to maybe can you talk to that a little bit? Because I feel like there are free resources out there that might help people with their struggle with their mindset about business or making decisions or how to break down these numbers. I mean, you're gifted at it, but not everybody is.
Yeah, the SBA courses, I believe it's sba.gov. Um, and I can put it on my Instagram too. They have so many free resources, like a free business plan that you can download. They have free webinars. But also, when I went to the ASCFG conference, I remember Five Fork Farms. Their presentation talked about using things like the U.S. Census Bureau to figure
Hmm.
out, the number of people in your area, the medium wage, like how much people make, the medium education. And that was so helpful because the farmers market that I went to in the very beginning, I went to the farmers market in the area, the small pocket of area that was the highest income level in Dallas Fort Worth. There's a lot of resources out there. Um, they're not all in one place. I wish that they were all in one place. But again, it's acting with intention. So if you can sort of look at your business and see where your weak points are, then you can go search out information in that area. I also want to say that the farmers market, you're next to all these other people that are small business owners.
Mm.
And I used to say that going to the farmers market was sort of my small business support group because I would talk to other vendors about their businesses, their profit margins. And when you get to know other small businesses, you can talk business talk with them. You can talk shop and you can learn a lot from them in that way as well. So, yeah, the SBA, so many free resources, the ASCFG, tons of business resources specific to the business of flower farming, and then just other small businesses in your area can be a great resource as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And a lot of times, especially kind of going into a slower period for a lot of farmers, this might be a great time of year to start digging into the numbers, digging into these resources, and reaching out to maybe other vegetable farmers or other people in your area. I mean, I think those are all great ideas.
Yes, and sorry, every metro area I know often has all these small business groups. So even just when I search like small business Dallas, that hashtag on Instagram, there's all these amazing groups that exist to support small business. Some are for women owned small businesses, and they have conferences, they have meetups, they have get-togethers, and you can just go and join in and learn from all of these people and join that community of small business owners and learn a lot. Again, it's learning from community. People who are doing it with you can offer so much insight.
I love that. And the thing is they don't have to be farmers for us to learn something from them.
Yes.
And a lot of times we feel like, well, what are we going to learn from, this person that owns an ice cream shop or owns whatever. And it's like, yeah, but so many times it's the same issues. It's the same challenges. Maybe it's marketing.
Yeah.
Maybe it's profit, whatever.
Yes. I remember one conversation I had at the farmer's market with a small business that baked cookies. And they were talking about their wrapping and how they were using this certain way to package their cookies because it cost less. And then it made me realize, well, how much is my packaging for my flowers costing? And I actually ended up switching my packaging to sort of a cheaper option because I realized the packaging wasn't really important to my customers. So I might as well go with a little bit of a cheaper package option and not pay as much. And it came from a conversation with another small business.
Okay, so now I've got to ask, what do you do for packaging?
Well, so when I give my flowers to my florists, I put a rubber band and that's it.
Okay.
I don't package them in anything. They love it because they don't have to tear off packaging for all the flowers because in transit, they're just upright in a bucket. They're not getting damaged. So there's really no need for packaging. At the farmer's market, I moved away from like a fancy colored sticker to a black and white sticker. It costs less to print. There's a couple other things that I did. I can't remember off the top of my head now because it was several years ago. But the point is like to not be fancy and spend money in these areas where you're not getting a return. So I'm getting a return when I spend money on compost because my flowers are high quality. But I'm not getting any extra return for paying more for a colored sticker than a black and white sticker. So things like that, you can really get insight from other small businesses.
Yeah. I love that. And, so many times we're trying to cut down on waste, especially plastic waste. And, having a rubber band and a bunch and no sleeve at all, I think that's awesome. That's really great.
And that was feedback the florists even gave me. They're like, you don't have to put this in a paper sleeve. We rip it off.
Yeah.
Like try sending it without that. And I did, and the flowers were fine. So we're like, hey, this cuts down, so much labor time, sleeving everything, so much waste. It cuts their labor time out because they don't have to unsleeve it. So it's just a win-win.
Yeah. Absolutely. And your flowers shine more because they're not hidden behind some packaging, right?
Yeah. And sometimes I think actually the act of packaging and unpackaging was damaging them more. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can't believe, but we are at the end, and
oh no,
I know we could talk. I know for a long time. Curious, is there a piece of advice you'd like to leave with our listeners We always like to wrap up with an advice question, and you have a lot of great experience to share from.
Yeah, I think the one piece of advice I would leave is to know your own business well. Just get to know it well. Just get to know it like it's your best friend. And then make decisions based on your needs, whether you're a florist, whether you're a flower farmer, just a farmer, or in any business that you're in. Meet your needs. Don't make a decision because of what someone else is doing or what someone tells you you should do. If you know your own business and your own life, make decisions to meet those needs, and it will really just be the best decision.
So I want to ask, because I think that's a great piece of advice. When you say know your business, for people who might be wondering, what exactly do you mean? What do you mean by really know your business?
Well, so there's a couple of things with that. The first is I know that my business is mostly a grower. I'm not a florist. So I'm not going to take one-off orders for a random floral arrangement here or a random floral arrangement here. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of my time cultivating customers. What I'm going to spend my time doing is growing really great flowers for the customers I already have. And then I know that my business is a part-time business, so I'm not going to expect a full-time income from my part-time business. So I'm going to make financial decisions based off that reality. And then I know how the business fits into my life. So I'm not going to let it take over parts of my life that it shouldn't. I'm going to keep my business in its lane. When I was at the Team Flower Conference, I think her name is Natalie from Native Poppy. Mm-hmm. She said something really clarifying for me. She said, make your business work for you. You don't work for your business. Your business works for you. So I know what I want out of it. I know what it actually is. I'm not an influencer. That's not my business. So I'm not going to spend all day making Instagram reels.
Right.
That are cute. So I know my business and I make it work for me. And I make decisions for my business that work for me. So.
I love that. Well, Sarah Jo, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all the energy you put out into the world from south of Dallas there in Texas. I feel like your reach has reached the lives of a lot of people. And I appreciate you being on the Flower Podcast.
I appreciate you so much, Scott, because education is such a key to unlocking so much for all of us. And you provide that education. And I cannot thank you enough because it has helped me. And I'm sure it has helped so many other people.
Thank you. It's so sweet.